Each morning, just after my kids head off to school, I make the short trek across my backyard to my wood shop. I don't consider myself a professional woodworker, but I do like to start each day with at least some small contribution to whatever my shop project may be. I spend most of my day working in my office. I'm fortunate that it's located in a corner of the barn that houses my wood shop. I've always enjoyed making things. By training and profession, I'm a software engineer. Thus, many of the things that I build are digital. But I've also spent my time outside of work making things out of wood, physical things, things that provide a balance to my virtual creations. Alpine Trails Studio was created so that I could share some of these things that I make, and also so that I can share some of the things that I've learned along the way. So what is Alpine Trails Studios anyway? I think that's a good question. From a legal standpoint, it's a business, but I didn't create it as a means to make a living, so I don't think it's primarily that. You could also look at it as a brand, a name to attach to the things that I create, and there's probably something to that. It would be a great accomplishment for me to see the things that I make instill a sense of quality, creativity, and care. Still, I don't think that this was the main motivation for creating the studio. No, for me, I think Alpine Trails Studio is a story. I hope that it's the beginning of a wonderful and long story, one that has at least some small impact on many lives. I don't yet know how the story will play out, but like any good story, it has an origin, the story that brought me to this point. It is that story that I'd like to tell today. I was born into a wonderful family. As the oldest of 4 children, I was lucky enough to experience the earliest years of our family's life. My father, by trade, was an electrical engineer. More importantly, he was curious. One of the greatest attributes I got from my parents was an eagerness to learn and to do. Surely if someone else could learn how to do something, then we could too. Like many young couples, my parents wanted a home where they could raise their family. And like many young couples, they didn't have a lot of extra resources. So my dad figured if someone else can build a house, then why couldn't he? This was the late 1970s, and there was no YouTube to learn from. It would be years until Larry Hahn got in front of a camera. To prepare, my dad would just wander around housing developments after work hours and try to piece out for himself how it all was done. To his credit, and I'm sure after many lessons learned, he did build that house. He was even nearly finished by the time I was born, though it is possible that my mom wouldn't agree with that last statement. A couple of years later, my dad and my uncle decided to work together to build new houses, one for each of them, on neighboring lots. They started a construction company together, and just before I turned 3, our family moved into one of those new houses. This was the home that I lived in until I graduated high school. That house had a basement, and in that basement, my dad had built a wood shop. For several years as a young kid, my bedroom was just on the other side of the wall of that wood shop. My dad would work there at night after the kids had been sent to bed, and you might think that the noise of a shop would be an annoyance, but I came to find listening to the sounds of the saws as my dad was working to be comforting. As I got older, I was gradually allowed to use more and more of the tools in that shop. My dad didn't stop building either. He continued to work as an engineer, but as my parents saved up money, they would use it to build more houses that they would rent to other families once they were completed. While my dad did most of the work, we kids would get involved where we could, and slowly we also learned what it took to be builders. Eventually, I left home, finished college, I got married, and I began a family of my own. My wife and I bought a small home when she was expecting our first daughter. It was a great starter home, but it wasn't perfect and it needed some work. So following in my father's footsteps, I began adding on to the house, starting with a new kitchen. A few years went by and our family continued to grow. We found the opportunity to buy a piece of land not too far from our current home, and so we did. My dad had recently retired from his engineering job, and he had told each of his kids that he would help us to build a house. The financing and most of the work was still on us, but he wanted to pass on all the things that he had learned. It was super demanding, building a house while still working full-time, but it was also an amazing experience being able to spend that time working alongside my father, this time as an adult myself. It took just over a year, but our family moved in just 4 days before my youngest son was born, and so my kids were able to have the same experience I had had, growing up in a home built by their dad. I wasn't always building homes, but I was always looking to develop and apply my building skills. I built up a reputation in my neighborhood and within my church community as something of a handyman. People would frequently ask me for help, and I always told them that I only ever charged in baked goods. That worked out great for me. I also got involved in building with Habitat for Humanity. Anyone can volunteer to build with them, and it's something that I definitely recommend. Regulars with demonstrable building skills get to take on jobs a bit more complicated than the average volunteer, and I would volunteer as often as I could to keep that building itch scratched for me. I was really starting to learn what a wonderful experience it was to combine building with helping others. When the COVID pandemic hit, and while most people were hunkered down, I took the opportunity to start building for myself again. It was a big undertaking, a house larger than I or anyone in my family had ever built before, and I was trying to build it mostly on my own. I restarted the construction business my dad and uncle had created decades earlier, and I just worked at it mornings, evenings, and weekends until one task after another was completed. In all, that project took nearly 3 years, and by the time it was done, life began changing again. My kids were reaching the age where they could start out on their own. An opportunity came up at work for our family to move away from our home in the Pacific Northwest to a few states away in the high desert. We sold the house I had just completed and we moved out. And this is where one story ends and a new one begins. Our new home came with a dilapidated old barn. In that barn, I saw an opportunity to build something new, a wood shop similar to the one that I used to fall asleep next to as a kid, listening to the sounds of the saws spinning into the night. The walls and roof came down, and back up they went, in much better condition than they were before. Plumbing, electrical, heating, insulation, all were put in place. The tools were wheeled or carried into their positions, and cabinets were built and installed. Bit by bit, I built up that shop and readied it for its new mission, to give me the opportunity to make this new story centered on building. I hope that is not just one story, but many. That is ultimately what I would like Alpine Trails Studio to be about. The building done in one person's shop that can make its way into the stories of many people's lives. That is why I want to share this next chapter of mine through the videos I make. Maybe someone will see something I create, and it'll inspire something in them. Hopefully, I will find things to build that will become a blessing in someone else's life, and that story will bring its own inspiration to those that see it. I don't really know how it will all unfold. I do know that it will be a fulfilling experience for me even to try. It's a story that I am looking forward to playing out, and I'd be delighted to have you join me.